Ah, great. Hey, Evil Z, how you doing? Um, I got off to a little bumpy start there, but anyhow, uh, so we'll hang out for a little while. By the way, too, if you got anything you want to talk about, let me know. The what I've been doing, I've been contacting different watch companies about their service charges, and sort of to build that into the whole issue of buying and owning watches. So I thought, be something we could talk about. Um, the Most of the people were asking about the ownership price of a Breguet, so I'm going to talk about a Breguet first, and I'll wait until we get a few more people who are interested in talking about that, and then we'll have a bit of a chat. Uh, what kind of watches do you have, Evil Z? Oh, really? You just had three watches service? How did you get them serviced by the AD or the manufacturer? Anyway, last year, hi Oscar, happy Monday to you too. um, anyway, well, let me tell you what happened. This morning, see, the Brigade Boutique, uh, Frank Mueller. I tell you, and I'm probably saying this one, Frank Mueller, I don't really know that well. I mean, I know of his stuff. Some of the things he has is absolutely fantastic. Um, One of the guys collection I'd reviewed some time ago had a couple of here you are, Rudy. Uh, a guy that I had reviewed had a couple Frank Muellers that were really gorgeous. The dials on them and the a lot of the things on them were really nice. But I don't really, honest to goodness, know that much about them. But they were. I'll put it this way: I was somewhat surprised on how much I did like them. So that was a good thing. You had the AD take care of the service. Okay, let's see. Oh, you had your Rolexes. You had a couple Rolexes done. Okay, and did they do a good job on service? Evil Z. Yeah, no, neither am I, Rudy. But some of them, boy, I tell you, they were really neat. I mean, more so than I had imagined. It just depends on which one you get. No complaints. Okay, so not great, not great. I Last year I had two of my watches. Um, yeah, I know depreciation. Well, the watches I buy, some depreciate, some don't. But I don't pay attention to that. I really don't. Maybe I should, but I don't. I try to find a good watch, and it's either good or not. Here's one that this is my Beauvais, 1930, and this is one that is not a popular watch, but they're incredibly well made. They have everything is in house, and one of the things that I like about this watch that I always like to point out is when you have the movement. Look at how that movement fits this 42 millimeter case. That thing is it was built. The case and the watch were built for each other, as opposed to having a straight big case with a little bitty movement in it. Um, good. Yeah, both is they're really cool. Anyway, I'm not here to brag about my watches, but what I want to talk about. Oh, let me give you my experience with contacting um, Breguet this morning. Hi, Rich, buddy. 40 full service ceramic Rolex. Yikes! Um, for as I mentioned last year, I had both of my FP Journe serviced, and let me tell you what I wanted to do. Uh, One of them had the papers, and the papers are simply this little card that with a hologram on it that tells you where they were first bought and everything like that. And the second one didn't have any papers, and it had to be checked out by FP Journe. And finally, I got a letter of authentication signed by FP Journe on my Chronomet Resonance. So, yeah, I'm dealing with a couple good watches, really. I mean, they were not anything but the real deal. Well, both of them were beautiful watches, and I didn't, especially with the Resonance, I didn't want anybody touching those except for I was going to send them to Geneva. And what happened was that they said, well, no, they'll do them here in the U.S. They had FP Journe has a service center in Miami. And so I sent them down there, and see, my wife was watching, listening in. They were like, that was what they, which was a lot. Now, I had them totally overhauled. And with watches like that, it basically, there was some things that I didn't quite like, so they took out anything that was wrong with it, took out, put in new parts, did the whole thing. And one thing I had them do, I had them polish up the platinum. I'll never do that again. They did a good job. That's not it, but good grief for the expense. That really brought it up. Anyhow, so that's been one experience. The other experience that I had with was a guy who is a master watchmaker, and he took my Zenith, and it was $350. He told me essentially it was a Zenith Elite GMT. He said there's nothing wrong with it. You got a great watch. It cost me $350, but felt pretty good about it. Now, the going back to how this whole thing was started was that I got a question about people who we talked about Breguet, entryway to Breguet, and some people were asking, and rightfully so, well, what about the service costs? Well, I called Breguet this morning in their boutique in New York, and somebody had not undone the phone. In other words, the phone was just recording, and it was really it was almost funny. And so I called another retailer in Flushing, New York, and talked to somebody there who knew about Breguet, and she told me of what they had. First of all, he said you only needed the service about once every 10 years. Now this is from Breguet, and the price on it was $800. Now, if you get a good watch, and Breguet's a good watch, you get a high horology watch like that, and you figure every 10 years it's going to be $800. That's $80 a year, which isn't so bad. Okay, now if these really expensive watches come with a really expensive service. I was told by the guy who's a rep for H. Moser that the H. Moser Henry double hairspring I had, the engineering on it was so expensive in the first place that they quit making them. So I don't even want to know what that's going to be when I have time for service. Okay, uh, let me give you some stuff that I had from Breguet. In addition to $800 every 10 years, if you're going to use it for swimming, and are you going to be going to water with it? Every 2 years, you need a waterproofing test on it, and that's $300. So, but if you don't take it in the water, figure okay, you own a Breguet, your service cost is going to be $800, and $800 is not just the service; it's the total overhaul. So, having a watch for 10 years, get a good watch, take good care of it, and then at the end of 10 years, if you wear it a lot, off it goes for its overhaul. Yeah. So anyway, so what are your thoughts on that? Let me see. I better see if I can catch up on stuff. Uh, Full service is 550 quid. That's way more than in the UK. How different is 550 from $800? It may not be that much different. If and I could be wrong about that, Rudy, but so anyway, the it's not none of these watches. I don't think are they're not bargain watches. We're not buying bargain watches. And if you have an inexpensive watch, yeah, you can take it to a guy who likes to work on it. Now, this let me make a shift here. There are two things. First of all, if you get a watch with an ETA in it, your local watchmaker is just going to love it. They really do. In fact, if you go online and you look up some things on watchmakers, they will talk about how much they like ETA movements. And the reason for that are two things. First of all, they're used to working on them and they have all of the information they need. Second of all, they can get the parts. And so you have them, they're they're very well liked by watchmakers. And so sometimes I think that some people say, "Oh, my ETA is the best watch in the world," and um, it's yeah, it's okay, but it's not um, because it's that great of a watch movement, but rather because watchmakers love them because they like to move on it, to work on it. The one that I bought, I just bought in fact, it wasn't even ETA. It was the clone of an ETA, 6497, which is a basically ETA's version of a Unitas 6497. And that thing, boy, I tell you, just tipped the regulator and got that thing, almost down to 0 seconds error on it. So that's another whole thing. If you're going to do that now, what I'm thinking is that you sort of have two ways to go. If you're going to have a really expensive watch, you don't want to take it to some guy, and I think it's Rudy calls them back alley guy going in there to bang up a watch. Hey, Port Val, Nick, and William, and let me see. I haven't said hello to everybody. Kev G, 62, and Andrew Nisbet. Hi guys. Kev, let me see what I said. Rich Buddy, how you doing? Okay, just want to welcome everybody. Port Vale, Nick, wanted to get to that again. All right, so going back to what I was talking about, I had a watch that, in fact, it was this one. This is a beater if there ever was one. This is a Raymond Weil, and the first time I tried to take the back off, to take a look at it's got an ETA in it. I lost one of the screws, so I had to go around with 3 screws holding the back on. And I was down on 47th Street off of Fifth Avenue in New York, where you have sort of the Diamond District, and they also have all these watches. There's this one place, and Federico used to just go crazy talking about these guys. They said, they don't have the dust covers, they don't have everything you should have for good work with a watch. But this guy had a screwdriver and a little screw, and Oh, excuse me. Uh, so this, he put it back. He gave me the screw that I lost. It was $26 for that. But I'd never take a good watch in there and have the kind of guys work on it. And Rudy had said, "Now, this is you don't want to do that. You're not going to save money. You know, you go out and you spend, $10, 15, $20,000 on a watch, and you're going to save maybe $1,000, $2,000 on the service by taking it to some guy who's opened up shop, down the street. If you know a really good, a master watchmaker, that's different. But boy, I tell you, in terms of service, it's probably a good idea to figure out what your service costs are when you buy a watch, especially if you're planning on hanging on to it. Hi, Rasher. Um, wow. Rasher, Bilbo said there are brands when the ultra high end models get no charge servicing for life. What brands are those, Rasher? I'd be interested in. I'd really be interested in finding out about that. Now, if you're talking about $100,000 watch from Wooten Lonnen or something like that, yeah, I could see that. That'd be great. But you sort of pay it as part of the watch you're buying. I know that BMW used to do that. They had one of the things that they were selling their cars for. It came with free service. Okay. um, all right. Let me see with the Swatch Group. William Ender. Good luck with the Swatch Group. There's Swatch Group, and then there's the Swatch Group. Both Breguet and Blancpain, part of the watch group, but they've got first-rate watches, I'd say, and they're different. They're not in the same pile, you might say, as some of these others. Um, anyway, that's my view of it. Um, okay, let's see what's going on here. Jacquet Droz. I love Jacquet Droz. They're another Swatch-owned brand, but I just like them. The history of Jacquet Droz is very similar to Beauvais. They both started in the China trade, and then because of the opium wars and a lot of other things, they had to get out of there, and then eventually the emperor was thrown out. Most of the things for Jacquet Droz and Beauvais were to the emperor, and they were making money like mad. The very first set of watches, I think Beauvais sent, either he went or one of his reps went to China, and he had 5 watches, and he sold them for $1 million. So this is to the emperor of China back then. Interesting kind of stories. Jacquet Droz are the same thing. One thing you might notice about Jacquet Droz, they got the 8, and 8 is a lucky number in China. And this is why you'll see a lot of those models like that. Okay, well, sorry, didn't mean to get off the topic. Anybody have any good or bad experiences with service you want to share that might help the rest of us? The new owners just bought the name. I tell you, that happened with Beauvais, and I swear the Beauvais did more with the name than its predecessors. I met the rep for Jacquet Droz last year at the watch show, the Watch Time Watch Show, and those guys have really done a lot of stuff. Redskin Pride, with a harboring 2, would it be serviced as an ETA? Well, if you're talking about the A11, no, because it's not an ETA. If you're talking about some of the other ones that Richard Habring modified, I don't know, to tell you the truth. One of the things that Jacquet Droz has, excuse me again, one of the things that Jacquet Droz has that is really interesting is in that they sort of brought back is what's called automata. and this is where they have something they'll do. They have this one called Charming Bird. This little bird comes out and does something on the watch. It's all mechanical. Very interesting kind of stuff. Um, One of the reasons we don't know Jacquet Droz too well, they really haven't done, or at least in the United States, they haven't done much in the U.S. Okay, little hay fever, not much. Okay, um, yeah, they are beautiful. There's Jacquet Droz. I really like them a lot. Okay, Port Vale Nick. Rolex UK service were good to me, but they removed stickers. Oh boy, yeah, the removing stickers thing is that's not they're not the only ones that do that, but they did it with the service. That's funny. Yeah, no, I see Oscar. I see what you mean. Hey, in something, in S something. Okay, how we doing on time? Ah, good. We got some time left. What are some other things you got? Question. William's got a question. What's a sticker? So, one of you Rolex guys take that. What do you mean by removing the sticker? I know someone else. Apparently, here in the U.S., the same thing happens. So it's not just UK, Port Vale or Nick. Let's see. Okay, Rich Buddy. Someone say, I had a couple watches. I still have it. I have a El Ra with a Pazoo 1701 or 7001 movement in it, which is now an ETA. And I took another one down that was, I wanted them to see if they could, um, I don't know, work on it. This was an older Beauvais, a Beauvais from the 1950s, and I think actually there was part of the Beauvais family actually involved. And they charged me $30. They fixed a non-running uh, Pazoo and told me there wasn't much they could do with the. It had a Baoju 84 in the Beauvais. This is from 1940s. But they only charged me $30. I did a good job, so no complaints. But usually I wouldn't take a really expensive watch there. Okay, anybody sticker on the back like to keep those? That's the green goop looking thing on the pictures. Okay, you had a problem identifying movement there. Oh, okay, good question. Redskin Pride. If you had problems identifying the movement in your Harry Winston, who would service it? Uh, hmm. What I did to identify mine, I contacted someone at Jared Paragos. If you search enough, you can find out who's what. And what he did for me, he dug up the Gerard Perregaux movement that Harry Winston was using. One thing about Harry Winston, they don't make any bones about it. They're using somebody else's movement, but for the most part, they use good movements. Now, I'm pretty sure that since Swatch bought them, the last thing on earth they're going to do is to start dropping ETAs into Harry Winston, because if they did that, uh, they'd have a hard time justifying the price of the watches. And so, what you get with a Harry Winston, you get, you name it, and they've made movements for it, especially in their Opus series. The very first Opus one, the movement was by F.P. Journe, and they've had Laurent Ferrier, they've had all of the great watchmakers make watch movements for their um, Opus one, their Opus series. There's Opus one, I think they're up to Opus 14 or 15 now. Apparently, they're going to continue that. But what I was told was that from now on, they're going to be using the Blanc Pain movements, which are Frederic Piguet. Essentially, they're derived from Frederic Piguet. from Blanc Pond. I said blank pane. I got in trouble for that. Blanc Pond. Um, okay. The most beautiful. Hello. Okay. We say howdy. Hi, howdy. We say howdy from here. We say howdy here. Um, okay. Anything else on service you can think of? All right. Um, well, one thing, I just realized, doggone it. Well, I can take these off. There. Um, can't. I forgot. Unfortunately, guys, I can't hear anything. Most agents send it to service centers. Not most agents send it to the service centers. Huh. That's interesting. Um, yeah. Identifying the movement in a Harry Winston, like I said, I just do my research, and then I contacted oh, Vitra directly at Agenhor to find out about the by retrograde module that they made for it. One of the things you can do, especially with you can contact people and say, hey, what's the movement in it? Unfortunately, especially at Harry Winston, the people at Harry Winston, some are, but a lot of them don't know a thing about the watches. The guy who is their specialist in watches, if he's been there for a while, he'll know. But they were, as I say, they were the jewelers to the stars, Harry Winston was. They did way back when they made watches. So, but I think it's sort of right around 2000 was when Harry Winston came back making watches. But they came back with uh, Roger Dubuis and somebody else. And uh, Jean-Marc Viterin. You start a watch company with those guys working on your movements. You don't get much better than that. Okay, Tyndale, what are your thoughts on preventive maintenance versus waiting until something obviously shows up that requires maintenance? We say howdy here. That's a good point. If your watch company says, look, you should have this looked at every 5 years or 4 years or 3 years, um, that is probably prior to something happening. What I was told this morning by the woman I talked to at Breguet, it would depend on how you use it. She said that if you use it with in the water, you should every 2 years you should have it water tested. I mean, for waterproofness. I think that's a good idea. I don't go in the water with any of my watches, good or otherwise. I don't. I take off my watches. I even take off my Fitbit when I go in the water. So, but that's a good question. I would say before you really had something major go wrong with it that will cost you a lot, it would be better to stick with some kind of maintenance schedule that's set up. Now that can be more expensive or less expensive. The two watches I took into FP Journe, I would imagine probably hit on the more expensive side because I had no idea of their service history and I had no records of that. And so what happened was that I thought, well, I'm going to bring it back to sort of a zero state. And then I can simply follow the schedule that FP Journe has for the type of watch. The Chronomet Souverain is sort of their standard. I think every 4 or 5 years you take it in. Whereas the Chronomet Resonance is, I think you have to do it every 3 or 4 years. So I definitely would suggest doing that. One thing I've been doing is that I let my watches unwind all the way. The reason for that, because first of all, most of my watches are wind up. They're not automatics. And every now and then I'll take my automatics out of the winder and let them unwind all the way. I like doing that. And the reason for that, it stretches the spring out. And so if you only let them go halfway, at some point they're not going to unwind quite as easy. At least that was the case that I had with a couple watches. And so I talked to a watchmaker. He said, "Well, it's better if you let them unwind all the way." The watchmaker I talked to was like a master watchmaker, not just some guy. Okay, I try to test shock resistance in my watches. Okay, the seals worry me the most, so waiting 10 years was enough. Yeah, 10 years is enough. You worry about the seal. Will Swatch hold these other brands to ransom on spare parts when the movement agreement ends? That is a concern. That's a real concern. And I think one of the things that happened when Swatch announced back, oh, boy, it's been about 15 years ago or so, where they announced, first they said, well, we're not going to supply iboshes to you guys anymore. So, go make your own or go use another source. Sellita came in and to some extent Soprod and filled the gap. But it turns out that Sellita was actually filling the gap for ETA because ETA was running out of stuff and they depended on Sellita to make them for them, and they did. So what's going to happen if they should hold them for ransom? Well, first of all, they got in trouble with the Swiss government. And so that was the reason that they sort of had this gradual step down. And what happened, in a good way, I think, is that you had companies like Maurice Lacroix coming out with their own movements. And so they said, well, okay, we're going to have our own movement. Now, a lot of these movements were suspiciously a lot like the ETA movements. The original Alpha that Nomos had was very close to an ETA, one that they had been using before. Anyhow, that's my take on that. So that's what, let me see. I doubt because these movements have been cloned many times. Yeah, you're right. In something, I think that's another good point. They've been cloned so many times. See, the only thing that Swatch has to gain by that is I think they learned their lesson because there's more and more watch companies say, we don't need you guys anymore. We got our own, we're making all of our own stuff. Then, they're going to lose business. And I think that's why they sort of pulled back on it altogether. One of the things, some of the smaller companies like Harboring 2, I think, boy, they cut them down to nothing almost immediately. And since they're Austrian, what does the Swiss care about them? And unfortunately for them, you're dealing with a guy with Richard Harboring, who made the Doppel for IWC. This guy was fantastic. So he made his own movement. And I don't think he even was breathing hard to do it. And he made a very good one, too. Okay. Let me see what you guys are talking about here. Okay. Let's see. In their production watches, not a good trade practice. Let me see. Okay. All right. Not a good trade practice. Probably not. All right. Well, listen. I got a bolt, but I did want to let me reiterate what I really started this for was that I had all these questions about the costs for Breguet, the service cost for Breguet. And so you figure about every 10 years, it's about an $800 charge. If you're going to be in the water with your watch, figure every 2 years for about $300 for a waterproofing test. But so, that's not so bad. If you're not going to go on the water with your watch, and I'm not talking about getting a little wet in the rain or, washing your hands and getting a little water. I'm talking about into the water with it. So anyway, okay, I'd like to mention that on the Rolex ceramic bezels, when the bezel meets the metal, it's weak. It wrinkles and bends. Okay, Rich, buddy, thank you. And on that note, hope to see you guys on Friday. Take care.